Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this Budget Finance Committee meeting. A couple points of clarification. I've already been asked, and I just want to be clear, there is no vote tonight. Tonight, we're just here to discuss and understand in front of the public what has been happening since our last board meeting. Quick reminder to the public in general, I'm sure the media recalls, but that last month we voted to table the budget that had been presented to us out of request and respect of our county commissioners that wanted to have the budget presented to them initially, and then since then there's been conversation between them. There's been public statements made by our county mayor, but this is the first time that the board has discussion about it since our last board meeting. And so even when I was asked for opinion about the statement, we have not discussed it as a board. And this is our chance as a board to learn about what the statement is, to learn about what the options that the county mayor is giving us are, and how perhaps we can implement it. Second reminder that I'll just take advantage of this moment is we as a board vote on the budget. That budget is taken to a county commission who either approves our budget or lets us know what their response is to that budget, but at the end of the day, we are obligated to fulfill the budget that the county commission provides for us. So any request we make to the county commission, they have full power to inform us as to what the budget. How we use the money within our context is the board's vote and the board's decision. The amount of money that we will receive is the county commission's decision. And so based on that, again, is why we want to work well and hopefully in very respectful terms with our commission, because at the end of the day, they determine the money we receive. So the plan today is I'm going to ask the team to just share everything that they know that's happened. I know we have a presentation that they're going to make. Then we as a board can ask questions. We can, speak to our minds about some of these things. We will get another chance on June 20th during the work session if there's anything else to be discussed. And then ideally on June 20th, we will vote for a budget. I will be curious what would happen if we voted for a budget and the county commission that then would have to vote to approve our budget didn't approve it, as July 1st is the beginning of the new budget, and that could be some of what we discussed. So last thing I'll ask of us as a board is for the sake of this committee meeting, not that I expect anybody would do this, but let's try to keep the discussion to the budget and to issues around the budget. But obviously, the budget affects everything, so I can understand how sometimes questions come up outside of that are directly or indirectly affected by the budget. So, all right. So, Justin, I'll pass it to you, and then we'll just kind of walk through this together.
Yep. Appreciate the context. And
excuse me, Dr. Robertson. I do publicly always try to refer to you properly, so I apologize.
You're fine. So a couple of documents you have a presentation in front of you, and you also have a option budget in front of you that we'll get to during the presentation. Always start every conversation we have with our just cause that will create opportunity by design so that all children thrive and experience a future without limit. One of the beliefs that we have really been pressing on is that public education is the foundation of our community, and it's a community responsibility to remove barriers to student success. our values that, you know, obviously, big value in this conversation is stewardship, and what we hope to show is that we have been stewards of these resources efficiently and, more importantly, effectively. Mind you, in budgeting, we always go back to our commitments. We budget through basically priority-based budgeting that aligns every dollar we spend to one or more of these commitments. And then finally, if we do all this work well, these are the type of students that we graduate in Hamilton County schools, which give you a little bit of a tidbit. Graduation rates look like historic this year, so we're excited in the next month or so to be able to share some really good news about what schools are doing, what our students and families are doing towards graduation. Mr. Perez already gave you kind of a breakdown of kind of where we've been since May. A reminder, May 9th, you know, we went and decided to push this vote to June. You guys kind of gave me a directive to go and work with our team and the county mayor's office to come up with some options. We met with the mayor's office to discuss what those possibilities would look like. On May 15th, we presented our budget to the county commission and addressed some questions that they had around those budgets on May 15th, and then followed up again with the mayor's office to come up with what we think are some options for this board to consider. And then here we are on May 20th, kind of presenting what those options look like. Some things that we've heard in the last month that we feel like are important for us to address. Keep hearing the number that we've received $100 million more dollars. The reality is we received $67 million more in TISA. That was an effort on the state's part to write BEP that was not effectively resourcing schools the way that we should. Ms. Black, are you having some technical?
Sorry, I'm having our monitor. Sorry. I'm trying
But we
All right,
do
that's
have
fine.
it. We
Yeah.
have it here, so.
Yeah. So I'm on the slide that
Yeah.
4 or 5 in that shows what we've
Yeah.
heard.
I'm just trying.
So, you know, again, the state trying to address some of those issues that we saw with BEP where large urban districts like ourselves were not being funded appropriate levels. What did we do with that $67 million? So in last year's budget, made some strategic decisions around our staffing model that, you know, invested $35 million more that went directly to schools, either in the base model or the strategic staffing that allowed them flexibility to address some of the needs that they have at their school. We invested $27 million into staff compensation, put $23 million towards student personalization and well-being, and we reallocated approximately $22 million to make that happen within a balanced budget. We also have heard, you know, that HCS increased positions last year and tune of over 500 positions. The reality is absolutely we did. We were intentional in that, and that we pushed those resources to schools and told them that they had the flexibility to use it as long as it is student facing. And so we've seen schools invest in a number of positions, some, you know, or some pushing on some of the things that they were already strong at, some filling some gaps, some getting creative. One of my favorite examples is Clifton Hills Elementary that took some of their strategic funds and turned their nurse into a nurse practitioner that's serving that community that really doesn't have great access to healthcare in a way that we've never been able to do before. I want to remind you, within that increase in positions, that central operations, which we have been referring to consistently as anything that is not school facing, has remained consistent at 8%. The national average is 9 to 12%, and we're very intentional about staying below that number. We also heard, you know, that we have not prioritized staff compensation. Over the past 2 budget years, this board has approved pay increases across the board of 8%, which represents the single largest 2-year pay increase in the history of a consolidated school district in Hamilton County. It's something that this board should be proud of. We also were able to sustain differentiated compensation, stipends, high quality health insurance and benefits across the board. So again, we have prioritized a compensation package across Hamilton County employees that we feel like is competitive. Also heard numerous times that, you know, we haven't been good stewards of resources. This board has not approved a budget that was not balanced in 5 years. The last budget that went that was not a balanced budget was in FY 2020. And so we have consistently worked within the means of what growth allows. And while we've been doing that, we've been able to get really good results and improve outcomes for each and every student. Capital maintenance continues to come up, and this is a legitimate concern. The reminder there is that the $6 million that came out of our budget last year is going to be bonded out. My understanding from the county mayor's office is that vote is expected to happen in August, the final vote. There's a couple of different rounds that may have to happen before that, but a final vote in August, which would secure $60 to $65 million in funds that would go right to deferred maintenance. That's not new buildings, that's roofs, HVAC systems, painting, and things like that. So although the budget still does only have $2 million in that account, the expectation is that $65 million would come on board that would allow us to really inject some pace into getting ahead of that deferred maintenance. So what we're coming with you tonight is an alternative budget proposal, and we're going to present this as option 2. What we'll continue to call option 1 over the next couple of weeks is the budget that we originally presented to you that basically had a request of about 20 to 21 million. This option 2 is coming with a one-time funding allocation of $5 million that would allow us to get all of our new teachers up to 50,000, would allow us to do a 3% increase across the board or a flat increase, which we'll talk about what that number looks like here in a second, and also do step increases. What we've been able to do and I've learned more is a tight budget year for the county in general, right? This isn't just tight for us, it's tight for the sheriff's office, tight for the mayor's office, health department, is really come to a solution that allows us to hit the compensation needs that we feel like are necessary to stay competitive regionally and across state lines. Again, that one-time funding allocation, that probably is going to cause some consternation for some of you. I see some head shaking. What we'll be able to do is look at this in a couple ways. Number one, we've already pulled some one-time things out of our budget. We'll continue to look for those opportunities. The textbooks being an example where we put that into fund balance. We'll continue to look for opportunities of one-time spending that we could use that $5 million to. I'll be honest with you, we won't be able to get to $5 million of where all that is one-time funding. But I'll use an analogy of what we did last year with CTE, where we kind of made an investment of CTE knowing that if we did this, there would be additional funding coming from the state. What we do know is that the state is going to require every district by FY 27 to get to $50,000. And so additional funds will be coming towards pay increases and compensation increases for employees. And so essentially this is front end money that will allow us to capture that additional funds next year. So looking at across our commitments, and what we did here is just to give you a high level overview. This is not new information. You've seen this, but this is a quick reminder of basically what we are funding, how much we're funding it in under each commitment. Reminder that some of these flow across commitments. So in the base staffing, we know that we have counselors in there, but we also count counselors towards that 33 million under every student belongs. But just so you have a reminder from what we've talked about in the past 2 months of what our budget will fund, here are the big categories. I'm going to ask Mary Ellen to go over the next 3 slides with you and make sure that we're up to date and that you understand what these proposals look like.
Before you do, could I ask a question?
Let's complete the
make
slides
sure.
and then just make sure you make a note of where you have a question.
Okay, so that you will see in the slide deck, and then you can also have this version, it's a different version, so you can see what changed between version 1 and 2, but what's up on the screen is the version 2 to compare to last year. So you'll see the TISA state number, so with all the changes that we've had, you'll see an increase from what we did previously, and that was due to expected increases from the dyslexia and the ENL numbers. We knew they were still working on capturing those numbers, and they were going to go back. Actually, it was retroactive for the whole year, even though they weren't entered into the system. And so we had held funds in our vacancy savings numbers, so that when that came up, we didn't actually increase any of our budget allocations. It was just kind of smoothing out the part from the TISA increase, because we had held that because we knew that was going to increase, and it didn't actually increase the total overall budget allocations. And then you'll see essentially the local funding is in those two lines. So the TISA local is what's required from the formula, and then the extra shows up the additional local. You'll see the TISA outcomes, and this TISA on behalf payments, we'll mention that it's a pass-through. There's several different things that come in our TISA formula, but the funds that never actually come to us, so there's an offsetting expense for the exact same amount. So it shows up as revenue, but it's also a complete expense for that exact same amount. And then in that $7.5 million of other operating revenue, that's where we show the $5 million investment, the one-time investment from the county is showed up in that line. If we go to the next screen, so this is where we pull it all together. So the $560 million will tie to the first page, and then we add in, there's nothing has changed in the other grant lines, so it just pulls to our new total of $663 million. So that's the all-in fund budget that we would take to the commission if this version were presented. And then again, this sheet, there's a front and back that shows the change in the revenue and the change in the expenses and where that flowed through.
So this slide right here is fund balance. We've gotten a couple questions about fund balance, and want to make sure that we're all on the same page here. I think there's a CAFA report that includes not just what we traditionally call fund balance, but also our school nutrition fund, our SACC fund, and that looks like it's in excess of $100 million. Reality is those are not what we typically talk about. Again, with the one-time things that we pulled out, the number that I'll point you to is in the right-hand column, the very bottom, is that we are basically going to have $19 million in excess of what the minimum requirement is. So our unassigned fund balance going into next year is going to be about $35 million. Okay, and so we've trying to show here we've been intentional about use of that fund balance, and that jump from FY23 to FY24, a lot of that was due to ESSER. So again, this is not a new slide, it's some updated numbers, but we've made some strategic decisions to put $10 million more into school staffing. We cut another $2 million from central operations, moved about 20 to one-time expenses. We're investing $3 million more into healthcare expenses. Those costs will continue to be a burden on us, and we're trying to get our hands wrapped around that. And then $18 million towards increased compensation. So this is the slide that is going to, I hope, kind of put a bow on this and allow you to see what this will actually look like. So on the left, version 1, again, that's what we're referring to as the version that we've presented to you the last couple of months, which is about a $21 million ask. That version would have allowed us to do 5% pay increase or $2,800 flat raise. It allowed us to do a step increase, get our new teachers to $50,000, implement some of the compensation study recommendations, and then put $1 million more into our strategic staffing for schools. With version 2, it's the $5 million one-time funds, which gets the investment to $18 million. What we're recommending here is employee raises of 3% or flat raise of $1,750. It would allow us to do a step increase for our employees and then get new teachers to $50,000. What it does not allow us to do is implement recommendations from the compensation study or put any additional money towards strategic staffing. our recommendation, and leave it here before we take questions, but our recommendation is that in 2 weeks, on the 20th, that we take this in 2 votes. First vote being option 1 or option 2, right? So the board decides, do we go with the version that we've been presenting for the past two months, or do we take version 2, which we presented to you this evening with the $5 million one-time investment? Once we make that decision, we would recommend a second vote that would decide between a % increase or the flat raise. So if we went with version 1, the second vote would decide, do we do a 5% pay increase or the $2,800 flat raise? This is only a recommendation, looking for your feedback on this. We feel like this is the cleanest way to vote on these proposals. So Mr. Perez, I'll turn it back over to you and see if you've got any questions.
So I just want to acknowledge that both Mr. Groen and Mr. Connor showed up. And the reason I want to acknowledge that specifically, and we knew that Mrs. Robinson would not be able to be here tonight, Mrs. Tiffany Robinson, is because I appreciate as much as possible everybody's involvement here, everybody's involvement who was able to make it to the county commission. Even they acknowledged and recognized that this is something that the board has taken very seriously, and I appreciate especially the involvement of the community as they are also speaking up in both directions. If you think that the community only speaks in one direction, you don't get the emails. So in both directions, the community is involved. So board, if you have questions or any comments, please go ahead and click on your thing and we'll go in order. Mr. Keene?
So you mentioned the 5 million. My question on that, and you answered the one, I was gonna ask you what the 3% is as a flat raise, but I see you've got it here. So my other question, the 5 million that you're talking about, is that the same 5 million the mayor's talking about?
Yes, sir.
So it's not 2 different 5 millions, it's one 5 million? to
Yes,
get
sir, it's the
this done.
same.
So, in other words, yeah. So the county commission's not willing, they have a smaller amount of excess money to be used, which I know is supposed to go to health services, police services, but of that excess, the Department of the school system's not gonna get any of that?
We're obviously getting growth money in this, right? And so we haven't had any discussions about that, so my expectation is the growth money is there. There were a number of different departments that came with larger increases. The number, and again, this is just me listening to their meetings, this is not in a conversation with the chairman or with the mayor, but the number that I keep hearing is that there's about $9 million to work with.
Mrs. Thurman?
Yeah, well, I have a couple of questions. On this increase pay compensation here, who does that include? You said across the board. What does across the board?
Full-time employees outside of self-funded programs. So any full-time employee, that would be, our secretaries, would be, our teaching assistants, any full-time employee.
Cafeteria workers? they're
So
considered-
cafeteria workers, remember, self-funded. So what we
Self-funded, right.
traditionally do with cafeteria workers and SACC is when we set this, is we typically come back and look at what their self-funded budgets allow and make a recommendation there. The past 2 budget cycles, if I'm not mistaken, they've been the same. We approved the same pay raises later for cafeteria workers and SACC that we did for certified and classified.
Okay. And that includes all central office, even including you? So you're gonna get your raise plus this raise? And
No, ma'am.
I have a problem. You're not gonna take this raise?
I
No
don't-
central office employees or assistant
Remember,
staff?
I'm still under the contract,
Oh, yeah, I
original
understand.
contract that I don't get.
You don't get those
That's
raises?
right.
Okay, just clear that up, so people understand. Okay, so, there's also a question about the bonds. When will the bonds be available? This is just the $6 million that we gave them to put out, that they're gonna give us bond back. That's just for capital maintenance time. when are the other bonds gonna be available? Do you know?
My understanding is the August date
Au-
is for both.
August is for both of them?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. That's what I was wanting to know. And I tell you, I know that y'all really like the new staffing model where principals have a lot of autonomy. But as I told you when we discussed this, you told me, you said, Rhonda, I thought you'd be tickled to death about you. And I said, I know principals, some of them. I'm not real sure about this, and some of my worst fears have come true. I'm seeing some things that I'm thinking, why? It seems like sometimes it's almost to make the principal's job easier and not so much as to make the academics better. And I'm having a big problem with that. I think sometimes we take our eye off of what we're supposed to be doing, because a lot of these people we've added in the schoolhouse have not necessarily presented itself to help us as much academically as we were told would happen. So I don't know if everybody keeps an eye on what their schools are spending this money on as I do, but I'm seeing some things in some of my schools I really just don't like. This school basically give the principal all of the autonomy to do just whatever they want. I'm just not real sure that's a good plan, because I won't call out anybody right off the top of my head, but I will talk to you about it later. But those are just some of the things that I see, so it doesn't bother me with not giving them any more money to do staffing, because it looks like to me that some of them are finding very creative things to do with staffing that are really not our responsibility. But anyway, the main thing I want, so this 18 million then includes the 5 million that the county's gonna give us.
Yes, ma'am.
That's not in addition to, but that is part of it. So that means we're gonna have to come up with 13 million.
Now, remember, we had 12, a little over 12
Right.
that we, in a balanced
About
budget.
that we were
had
gonna do.
set
Oh, so
aside. Yes,
that's
ma'am.
just taking the 5 and, okay,
Yes,
making
ma'am.
it, okay, thank you.
And again, like, your argument doesn't change. I just want to make it clear that it's not just principals,
No.
it's school leadership teams, and then it comes
Well,
to the community superintendent.
Whoever,
Doesn't change your-
yeah, it doesn't change my opinion, thank you.
Mrs. Robinson.
Yes, thank you. Has the survey for the competitive compensation been completed for all the employees applicable? And the B part of that is, are they up to comparable jobs in Chattanooga?
Penny's not here. I don't think the entire compensation study has been completed, so,
Yeah,
Okay,
it's big.
I
So
was
yes,
just, I was just wondering if the percentage or the flatter amount would get it to that.
yeah, I think they're still working through that. I mean, the plan it's a 3-year plan to address it and look towards that, but it's looking at a variety of factors, including the market rate.
Okay, and then on the increase for teachers, will the budget allow, well, with the mayor's help, I guess the budget will allow it to be effective this term instead of later, okay.
yes, ma'am.
Ms. Thurman, you came back.
Yeah, this $50,000, getting the starting teachers up to $50,000, what's that gonna do with the other teachers that are already on board that's not gonna, I
Yeah,
mean,
good question. So it will create some compression on the early stages of the salary schedule. If you remember back, and I should have gotten this date, and I ran out of time today. I think it was 2019 when we adjusted the salary schedule.
Right.
Remember, we lowered the lanes from 4 to 3. And if you remember then, there was steps 0 through 3, I think, that were the exact same.
Right.
And they were compressed, and we corrected that. Now there's smaller steps between 0 and 5. This will create some compression.
Right.
But still, like, for example, a new teacher that was hired this past year will get to $50,000, which will be a bigger increase than 3%. It's not just saying new teachers that we hire are going, it's anyone that's under 50 is going up to 50. Does that answer your question?
yeah, but still,
But
that's
a
gonna, that's still.
3-year teacher and a new teacher, that's kind of your asking, they're
Yeah,
both
yeah.
gonna be at 50.
That's
Well,
right, that's what I'm saying.
Well, we'll have to bring back, and we're gonna have to, we'll have to sprint to go with, into a PECA conference to look at that salary schedule. We think that it may not look like 0 is at 50 and 1, 2, and 3 are also at 50. It may just be smaller increments between, 0 and 4 than what we've been used to. So it might be like 50,000 for 0, 50,500 for 1, so on and so forth. But it will, your point is right, it will be more compressed at the early stages.
Mr. King?
Right, so I want to apologize to the county commission. I misunderstood. I thought that 18 million did not include any contribution from the county. So we are getting that 5 million. That was part of that. I guess now my question, we came up with 12 million. They're giving us 5 million. We're still short 1 million. But then we're also short, and I'm going to go back to this, and I know you know, I'm going to keep bringing this up. We've got the bonds are great, and that money's going to come available in August, but right now there's no money in maintenance, which means there's no money in maintenance in July. Well, the 2 million will come in, but there's been no money in maintenance since the last payments in March. And we've still got to come up with some money not put into a bond, but put into our maintenance so that, and I guarantee you that 65 million, when you look at Sequoia's needs for roofs and you look at, and I mean, we're saying it's not capital projects with regards to building new buildings, but it is capital projects with regards to replacing 8 to 10 different schools' roofs that are in need of replacement, air conditioning units and that. So then we've used up the 65 million and we still don't have the general money that it's going to take to repair toilets and the day in and day out care and things that we need. So my question is, we've got to come up with another 1 million plus, I'm hoping we can come up with another 2 million after that to put in the budget showing within our maintenance. But so 2-part question, where's that other 1 million coming from to get version 2 to happen? And then where can we get 2 more million to put into our maintenance?
I'll let Mary Ellen, the first one's a rounding question. I'll let Mary Ellen address that, and then I'll address the capital maintenance.
Yeah, so if you look at the other sheet that we provided, so the short answer is the extra million is increased interest. So we looked at our interest rates and talked to the county finance and felt like we could recognize additional interest. So I looked at our interest we've been receiving this year and projections for next year, so that's that extra $1 million. So what we presented includes the $18 million of compensation from the 5 million and adjusting that revenue, and it's kind of the whole package, having that all realized.
All right, and we should also, if I'm correct, we should be getting a little higher than expected from TISA for this last
And that's included.
payout, so that is included, okay. I
Yeah.
was wondering if that extra was already included in this.
Yeah, so this is already adjusted. We got the May numbers, and that was already included.
All right. So then it falls on to the second question.
Yeah, so the second question, I mean, you're pointing out, I think, legitimate concerns with the 65 million, right? That 65 million over the next 5 years, we're gonna have to make sure that that's used appropriately. I'll say, like, the point of saying we haven't had any money to spend since March, we've worked with Justin Witt's team to make sure that anything that needed to get done got done, and we've, like we do every year, from either fund balance or vacancy savings or something, have moved money to his account. So we haven't neglected anything that had to get done, but the capital maintenance or deferred maintenance is gonna continue to be an issue. The 65 million isn't gonna solve it forever, but it does inject money that allows us to get a lot of these things done so that we can address it. I will say with the facilities plan too, part of what the strategy is, of course, is lowering our square footage, lowering the number of schools that we have, which then creates less of a burden on those deferred maintenance funds, right? I mean, once we consolidate Alpine Crest, DuPont, and Rivermont, and put them in a new building, that's gonna be savings every year that we're putting into those schools because of poor roofs, poor HVAs, and so, like, I understand, like, your concern is legitimate, I have the same concern. Right now with the budget that we have, the capital maintenance, 2 million, there's other funds, I don't know exactly off the top of my head, that are in maintenance where they purchase materials and our team goes and does the jobs.
Includes all their expenditures.
Yeah, so, but I hear you, and I think everybody on the board would say that's a concern. Our solution right now is the bond and the 65 million, which, you know, we'll have to address down the road as well.
You good, Mr. King?
Thank you. Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Just a couple of comments and then a question. So in the last 2 years, we've increased our teacher's salary 8%.
Yes,
So with this 3%, then it'd be 11%. Okay, so we'll make that
Over 3 years.
clear. Over 3 years, right. I was here back in the spring of 2019. Some of you were here, some of you weren't.
Some of us were just
I've been here a
being
long
born.
time.
You've been here a long
I
time.
was just being born.
But as I recall, so correct me if I'm wrong, that we went at that point with a $30 million ask, thereabouts. Is that correct?
I think 30, 35, somewhere around there.
Okay. And also, correct me if I'm wrong, we didn't get anything except growth money, right? So my comment would simply be by being able to get 5 million, I see that as a win, okay? But my question is this, and you spoke to it a little bit, but I want you to speak to it again, is this is one time money. So next year, how will we replace that $5 million?
Yeah,
And
so-
I got one other little question after that.
So, I mean, we're going to be strategic and try to pull as many one-time expenses out of this budget as we can. To be clear, that is not going to get to $5 million. So the remainder of it, the way that we're looking at is an upfront of additional TISA dollars that will come next year with, you know, the idea and the requirement that every teacher in Tennessee gets to 50,000 by FY27. I mean, to be fair, it's going to be tight. I mean, Mary Ellen and Sonia and I have talked about it extensively. We know it's going to be tight. We're confident that by that approach, we will get that money with the additional TISA dollars that come. Mary Ellen, I don't know if you would add anything.
And the growth, I mean, the county growth is in that range as well. So between those two, that would cover this kind of upfront investment.
And then next year is an appraisal year.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So if we're smart, then there may be
Not
additional.
us, we don't choose
We
that.
don't,
Well, I'm talking about the collective.
that's less than we benefited from that.
Then there'll be additional funds that should come in to the county.
I think one of the things that we've been saying is like, part of this was to start a conversation, which I think has been effective at that. It's not been comfortable. It's not been fun for any of us, but it started that conversation, and really the best opportunity, to your point of additional revenue, is that 4-year cycle of reappraisals.
Okay, all right, one other little thing. You may not be able to answer this, but I know that every year, once all of our actuals come in, we've paid all of our bills, and we start the new budget year. Generally speaking, we have some funds that are left over. Do we anticipate, Mary Ellen, that happening this year?
So well, that's how we funded some of the stuff. So we're kind of looking at what we think will come out of that number, and that's how we, when you look at the fund balance number, you'll see it's actually decreasing. So we're using some of those funds for the textbooks, I think we're gonna have some portables that we bring, to the board meeting as well. So we've already kind of calculated what we think that's gonna be. So it's actually, it will be drop fund balance, so we won't have extra added in, because we've already accounted for using it for a few of the priority needs that we've
So
identified.
even if there is some money left over from actuals, it's already spent, or it's
Basically,
already
yeah,
committed
yeah.
somewhere? Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Groen?
I just have a few questions. And I know it doesn't, anyway. Helen, where does the compensation for our ROTC instructors come from?
It's, Mary, I'll let you get to the
Yeah.
specifics. It's joint between the Army and us. But
Yeah. Yeah, so it's actually shows up as I think it's in the federal revenue. That's part of the federal revenue number in our budget is their reimbursement share. And so they've got their own salary schedule that's laid out with them on how they compensate that. So they show up in our expenses, and that's where their share of the revenue comes from.
Mr.
What
Groner,
is that
maybe
share?
I don't know the share off the top of my head. I think it's their retirement and then additional on top. To your point, though, it's changing. Like, I talked to Colonel Brooks about 3 weeks ago, and the Army is making some change. So what would probably be helpful is if we ask Colonel Brooks to come and address what that change would be, but we'll get an email to you tomorrow to let you know what it is.
Well, I know the colonel personally, and I'll see him probably
You call.
before our next meeting, so it's okay. And here's the reason I ask. Why do we have version 1 and version 2? I mean, why can't this board come up with a version 3 of their own?
You absolutely could.
Okay? In 2019, school year 2018-19, we had 290 employees who made over $70,000. We're now 5 years later. In 2021, we had 329 employees that made over 70,000. And in the end of the 2022-23 school year, we had 571 employees making over 70,000. Now, I haven't done all the math on all of these individuals on raises that they've gotten in the last 2 years or before, but when I look at the top salaries, in 2023, we ended the school year, and the first teacher was at 478 out of 571. And three of them were music teachers, and one was a agriculture, food, and so, and then a school counselor. And they're the only ones that made, I believe, that made over 80,000. Yes, well, there was, yeah, that's right. So, how many employees do we have?
6,000.
I mean, if you include everybody in self-funded, that means cafeteria workers,
No,
custodians.
just not
5,500
self-funded.
is 5,500.
5,500. Okay. And when we ended the 2023 school year, out of 5,500, 477 made more than $80,000. 478. So that's 5,400.
About 10%.
Yeah. Little less. So we had 5,453 employees that made less than $80,000. I don't believe in across-the-board pay raises. I just don't. Because if you took the numbers from 2 years ago and a 3% pay raise. And then the next year, a 5% pay raise. And then whether it's a 3 or a 5 this year, that gap just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm more focused on the principals and the assistant principals and the teachers that are actually in the classroom, the librarians, the counselors, the social workers that are actually in the school interacting with kids every day. That's where I want to see the bulk of the pay raises go. And Mr. Chair, I'm going to encourage this board to look at some sort of different version. We do not have to accept version 1 or version 2. It does, I think both do a disservice to the vast number of employees that are actually doing all the work.
Amen.
And I'm not saying that you guys don't work hard. Okay, I'm not saying that. But there is a limit, in my opinion, to the cost effectiveness. I know how hard you work. I have an idea of how hard you both work. Mary Helen, Mary, you know, you guys, I know you work hard, Miss Moody, but there's only so much you can do. But I certainly can focus on those that are actually right on the front lines, right in the schools every day. And that's where I think this board needs to put its focus.
Mr. Chair, I'd just respond. Mr. Grunn's right. I mean, these are version 1, version 2 from the administration recommendation. I've said this numerous times, and I'll continue to say this. I will never present a budget to you that doesn't provide every employee with the pay raise. I will never get in between our administrators and our teachers. There are large discrepancies between the workload. Like I'll remind you, when you see someone that's a coordinator is working a 260-day contract compared to a 201-day contract for a teacher. Remember, the raises go on the teacher salary, which then coordinator at a 1.38 multiplier is multiplied again. So it's not a full 5% increase for that coordinator. Just fundamentally, I've been saying this for 2.5 years now, like our principals work extremely hard. Everyone at central operations works extremely hard, and none of them are paid enough. And so if you're looking for a version that is separating the two, that'll have to come from y'all.
Ms. Black?
Well, to Mr. Grunn's point, this is the spread getting bigger between our highest paid employees and our lowest paid employees is exactly why I have been arguing for 3 months for a flat raise and came to this board wanting to give flat raises, because
I've been doing it for 20 years.
and I appreciate the option of having flat raises, because truly we have people who work for Hamilton County Schools who cannot afford to live in Hamilton County. And I think that is a travesty. So let me make sure I have this correct. This version 2 is, you came to it based on the $5 million one-time expense. And because we're looking forward to next year being able, and years going on, being able to absorb and maintain those salaries that we use that $5 million to raise. So this is the fiscally responsible thing to do, that like this $5 million is all we can absorb without the continued depletion of our fund balance. And like, this is what we can cover in the years moving forward without asking the county commission for additional funds. Because I've been kind of frustrated with the narrative around our budget. in the community and, you know, from some who sit on the commission, act like that we have a lot of places in our budget that we can cut. And we don't. We've built our budget from the bottom up. Most of our costs are fixed. They are salaries, they are healthcare expenses, they are fuel. We don't have a lot of places in our budget where if they decide not to give us the money, that we can continue operating at the level that we're operating. We took our budget to the county commission to tell them, this is how much it costs to provide public education in Hamilton County. Like, it's just what it costs. A lot of our costs are fixed, and I appreciate being able to, like, looking forward and trying to be judicious and being able to absorb that $5 million increase in salary pay. And I was kind of tossing around, like, do we borrow a little bit more for fund balance to kick in a little bit more, but we wouldn't be able to absorb it next year, is what you're saying. And to the point that if we're not going to use $5 million to fund the compensation study for a 1-year adjustment for classified employees, which is our lowest paid employees, basically, if we're not going to do that, that is another argument for a flat cash raise, so that it's not 3% of, they don't get a 3% raise of $27,000, but they get a flat $1,750. And so if we're wanting to help our current employees live in Hamilton County and be able to pay their light bills and put food on the table, I think if we're not going to fund giving the raises based on the compensation study, that's just another argument for flat raises. And I want to make clear, our substitute pay is negotiated in our contract with the company with ESS, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
When you bring the contract to us, we don't have any control over the salary that y'all have negotiated for subs.
You have a vote. Yeah, you do.
We have a vote to, like, up or down, do we take this contract or do we not? But we're not involved in the negotiation of trying to get higher pay for our substitutes to make it easier to fill some of those positions and attract. We vote yes or no on a contract that's already been negotiated.
Well, I mean, we take your input,
Yeah.
like we do on any contract, to go do the best we can. So,
Yeah.
I mean, not directly, you're not sitting across from them, but, you know, you have input and then you have your vote.
Sure. But that's, I mean, I would also like to see us try and do better by the hourly employees that we pay through our contracts as well. Because technically they also work for Hamilton County Schools. They may work for a company that we contract with, but they are in our schools providing a service, whether it's cleaning our buildings or whether it's being substitutes when we have teachers who take time off that they deserve. So I just wanted to clarify why we're stopping at the 5 million and we're not trying to kick in more to give more. It's because that's what we feel we can absorb next year. Okay.
Mr. Groen, you came on, off, then on. So
I just wanted to make sure I was,
it was
On.
working?
yeah. So, I don't know why this board, Mr. Chair, cannot come up with some sort of flat raise for those who are already over 80,000 and some sort of a percentage raise for those that are below 80,000. I would like to understand why we can't do that.
We
I
can.
mean, we can, but I would say that at this stage, we have, on the 20th, you're welcome to say no to both votes, and if the board does that, we can
Well,
ask
we
for a
need to
change.
have some kind of idea what they could be done, what those numbers look like. I mean, we don't know what those numbers look like. I mean, like, what's he gonna present?
Well, let's
But-
let Mr. Groen finish your comment or your question, then
I
it's,
mean, it's-
Well, I'm just following up on Mrs. Black. I know for sure that in 2 particular schools, we have people who are working in our exceptional ed department that if they're a family of 3, they're only, what, $500 away from the poverty level. If they've got a family of 4, they're $6,000 under the poverty level. So I got to tell you, I'm having a really difficult time with this. You know, a flat raise to everybody doesn't help them.
And it helps the people at the bottom more than it helps the people at the top. That's the point.
Well, that's true.
Because it gives a bigger raise to the people
So,
that are making
so I'm gonna
less.
suggest we're gonna follow,
Yeah.
we're gonna follow order here and Robert's rules. Mr. Groen, any other comments there?
Well, I voted for this budget, even though I had serious doubts. And, you know, well, we voted prior.
No, we haven't voted on the budget.
Okay.
Well, I'm against either version 1 or 2, except for, and I think we need a different version, and I'd like to see numbers.
Thank you. Ms. Thurman?
Okay, I don't think that Larry is saying not against the flat raise. I mean, I've been pushing for this for 20 years, the first time that anybody's ever bothered to do it, and I appreciate this, Justin, that you did get this, and I do appreciate it. But I know before when we were told for years that we could not give the teachers a raise without the administrators getting a raise, because whoever had a teaching certificate got a raise, because that's the way that it used to be with the teachers union. They said years ago, that's the bull crap they used to feed us, until we found out from the state that that was not true. And I've always said, if we can make the front door the back door, if now we have 9 votes, or however many, how many do we have to have anymore? 6. There's so many of us, I don't even know anymore. We have to have 6 votes, we can make the front door the back door. So we can do whatever we want to do. I wonder why we can't give like a flat raise, say give a certain percent to maybe give what would amount to a 1% raise to administrators, and say a 3% or 4% to all school-based personnel, or something like that.
Well, that's what a flat raise would do effectively.
Well, no, it doesn't, because there are a lot of administrators that are considered school-based that are not really in the school.
No, but I mean, if you give 1,700 and a person earns
No, that's not what I'm talking about. Give them, the ones that are administrators, give all administrators a 1% raise, not based on their salary, but just give them a 1% raise and give the others a 3%.
Oh, I see.
You see what I'm saying? I'm not saying give them all across the board the same amount of raise. Take the highest paid teacher and figure out what the highest paid teacher's salary is, and figure out what 3% of that salary is, so that teacher will not be hurt. And then give that amount to all teachers, or to all school-based personnel. And then the administrators, just figure out what 1% of their salary would be, and give that to everybody in the central office, something like that, to kind of help close this gap. We're going to have to figure out, you know, what to do about that, because it is a problem. And I agree with Larry. Some of these salaries have really increased exponentially over the last 5 years, or the last few raises we've given, which have been some pretty good raises in the last 5, especially 5 to 10 years, have been pretty good raises. And it has just really done nothing but widen the gap more and more and more. But this board has continually voted for new positions all year long. And every time you do that, this is what I kept saying, every time we get a new position, it's always a position that is needed so desperately, we hear, and we vote for it. That's just adding to our bottom line. Every time we do that, we add to our bottom line, and we did it all year long. I started out the first year keeping the track of it. I wished I had the entire year, but I lost track. But we voted for so many new positions this year and last year, and those are just added to our bottom line every time. And so I won't be here next year to be voting on them, but you need to think about that. Every time you vote for a new position, you're adding to this problem the next year when you sit down to do a budget. And I would also say this $5 million we're going to have to come up with next year to cover this one-time expense. I never like spending one-time money for recurring expenses, but next year I will highly suggest that you take care of this at the first of the budget, and anything else that doesn't fit in under that, do away with it. Figure out your priorities first. If that's your priority, and that's going to have to be your priority because you sure can't take the money away, to fix this $5 million off the top and then fit everything else up under it. And no, we have never started with a zero-based budget since I've been on this board. We haven't anyway. But that's something we need to think about. You need to think about it all year long because we're creating this monster all year long. This didn't just start. This has been going on ever since I've been on the board, voting for all these new positions year after year after year.
Mr. Connor.
So I'm a little bit repeating, but Mr. Groen's comment about voting on it made me need to say again that because I've had a lot of people ask us, this board has not voted on anything at all. We have not followed the standard of care for our body. Typically, and the way that it's held in every county in Tennessee is that the school board votes on their budget and sends it along to the county commission. It's not confrontational. It's not aggressive. It is the way that you do business. You make your budget and you send it along to the funding body. And then the funding body can choose to accept it or send it back. Now we're looking at different versions, and we're having talks of a third version of this, when this should have been a situation where we sent something that we apparently had all agreed on, so much so that people thought we'd already voted on it, and actually voted on and actually spoken for our constituents. Because, again, we're looking at a budget that not only have we not voted on, but has already actually been presented to the county commission in one fashion. But again, has not been approved by this body. Continue on, just to make notes, as you guys know that I like to do, we do need to note that despite the fact that, yes, there will be compression in getting these teachers to $50,000, that is something that is a must within the next 2 fiscal years. It is a state law that we absolutely must have our teachers up to $50,000 as a starting salary. So again, recognizing that there will be compression, but we need to navigate that and figure out the best way to navigate that. But we're up against the wall. We have to make this decision. We have to do it sooner than later. That's coming back around to all of it. It's just, this is the way that we're doing business here. It doesn't feel right. It feels like we're trying to buy a house, but we know the price, but we haven't looked at the mortgage rates, and we haven't looked at our homeowners insurance and all the other things that need to go into it. We just keep talking about the same thing but not making any choices. We have not definitively made any decisions, and we need to be able to do that before we can move on. So I'm just frustrated that we haven't been able to conduct business, and that we're having to further lament things that we have not even had the opportunity to vote on.
So I'm going to give a few others who haven't spoken a chance, and then just kind of remind us how to close this as we move on. So, Ms. Jones.
I just have a question on sustainability. That's a big thing for me, especially in a state of public education in the world, locally. I want us to be able to pay them what they deserve, what they earn for their skill set, and I want us to be able to sustain that. I don't want us to have to hunt for that every year. And so as much as, so I like the whole flat, I like the flat rate. I do agree with some of my other board peers where, and I just had the same conversation at Head Start, but I do feel like it comes to a point that we have to focus on those that are doing the direct service. I'm not saying no, others are not, but I'm talking about the classroom teachers who are dealing with children and families and all that comes, the whole child. and all that comes with that, day in and day out, 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, if they doing other stuff in the buildings, weekends when they're surrogate parents, all of those things. We have to make sure that they understand that we value them to the point that, yes, we all would like more money. And I'm not saying this is about money, but everybody loves a raise. Everybody does. But at some point, if I'm salaried and I know as a leader, I make more money than the person that's dealing with that day in and day out. As a leader, sometimes I think we have to say, okay, we're not gonna do this time. We're gonna give this all to them, because we are only as strong as the people who are our supports and our team. And so what does that look like? So I do like the idea of looking at possibly 3% or 1% or a 2% and a 3%, something where it's not, the across the board for me is I struggle with across the board. I struggle with that. And in my career, in my role.
Talking about across the board raise?
Yeah, I'm saying like the 3% across the board. I like the 3% to teacher, flat rate. I like the 3% to teachers and ex-ed assistants and not receptionists, administrative supports. And I mean, I like in the building that's dealing with the mama that might be cussing them out at the door. And I want them people to get the nutrition worker who won't work through the summer. Those people, the paraprofessionals, those people, nothing against the others, but those people, when you just look at salary to salary, it's different. It's a significant difference. And I think we have to value that. And I was saying where I work, I mean, I'm appointed. I don't get the raises that my staff gets. I don't. But I'm blessed to make an income where that's not someone that I employ either. And so I'm okay with that. I want them to always get it because I'm only as strong as them. So I think we really do need to consider that, and that could be a third option. Something to just look at, maybe breaking it up. I don't know. That's something I know that goes through PECA and HCA and all of that stuff, but just something and looking that up. But sustainability is a big thing for me, just a really big thing for me. And I know that the county commission, I mean, I listened to the meeting last week. I've read the articles. But I want to remind those on the county commission, especially those who have sat at this dais with us, who have had to make tough decisions with us. Some of us, maybe not all of us, but some of them that sit at the county commission at that dais have sat at this dais, and they know the tough decisions we have to make. Some of those that work in county mayor's office have sat at this dais with us, and they know the tough decisions that we have to make. And county salaries are public record, and when I look at some things that people make in the county, that don't do and endure half of the stuff that our classroom teachers and our people in the building endure, I think maybe they need to cut their salaries and provide some of their raises to the people in the buildings, because public education matters, right? And so I have to say that, because we get stipends as school board members, but it's not a minimum wage salary like a county commissioner. Maybe cut the stipend at the county commission to give them money for teachers. So there are things that we can look at. The $5 million is great. But I feel like if you all looked at it as our executive committee and said we need the $12 million, I mean, at least meet me halfway. You ain't even give me $6 million. And that's just how I feel about that, because we're losing more teachers than we're getting them. And I'm saying in the world, it might not be in Hamilton County, Justin, but across the world, nobody's going into education. And when you look at the generations, the nomadic systems the nomadic style of life that's coming into play, people want to get paid and do less work. So when you have people that want to do hard work, difficult work, compensate them. Period. Or we could just become Hamilton County government and school system with 1,000 kids and everybody in private and parochial schools around us because they're getting them ESS, whatever that stuff is. I talked to 5 families this week from District 5 that are not coming back to District 5. They're going to the Glenwood School. They're going other places with that $7,000. So I just think we have to really look at what that looks like. And I know we can't look at it because we don't have the wherewithal to fund all of it. But I do think that those that do have that need to really consider that. And I really challenge those who have sat at this dais with us and are at that new dais making decisions to think about when they sit here with us.
Mrs. Robinson.
Thank you. With a flat rate across the board, the gap is the same. The gap is still there. What I was hoping, if their competitive compensation the survey proved that different people, the salary was not up to par. In a perfect world, that would be raised. Is that under consideration?
It is, but the compensation study is not done, right? And so we don't know what that is. But again, that's probably not going to come back around teachers as much as it's gonna come back around like plumbers, electricians, and things
Right.
like that.
That's what I visualized. Okay, thank you.
Mr. King.
I was gonna ask Mary Ellen if you could do something for me. So, we have the $1,750 flat rate we're looking at. And could you take that times the number of employees that we're gonna be giving that to, and that's gonna be a total amount toward that. And then, look at doing this. It was mentioned, Rhonda mentioned it, so I started playing with numbers. So, look at every employee making $80,000 or more, giving a 1.5% raise, and then seeing what's left over out of that total number to see what the remaining number of employees would get. So it's a simple thing. You got a total amount. Once you figure that out, subtract it from it, and then divide it by however many employees there are left that didn't get that part. And then also do the same thing with a 2% raise. So if somebody making 100,000, came out in the paper a month or 2 months ago, how many of our employees make 100,000 or more? That was one of the targets, and it was, I want to say it was somewhere between 28 and 32 or something. And that was, so you figure on 100,000, 2% raise is 2,000, which is more than what we would be giving. So we don't want to do that, so that's where the 1.5 came up. But, so Rhonda mentioned about, dual reward process. So the upper end, we do a percentage, but not, it can't be at a 2% because then we're actually awarding principals in the $100,000 range more than the rest. But at 1.5%, then that would also leave the pot that's left over at something that I'm estimating would be about $1,800 to $1,850 per lower employee.
Maybe, but again, if you're gonna ask us to do this, we're not going that small. Like, you're gonna ask us to do something bigger. Essentially, we're gonna separate employees over a $50 raise. Instead of $1,750, get them to $1,800. Like, is that worth the dissension that's gonna create? You see
But
what
is
I'm
that
saying?
gonna create dissension is my question is,
I'm like, again, my belief on this is that, we have assistant principals, whether or not you think we have too many or not, that are working really, really hard. We have, employees over here that are working really, really hard. And I think they all deserve a raise. If you're asking us to go back to the drawing board and look at what it would mean to separate someone less than 80, like, if we're gonna do that, we need to do it bigger, right? You need to say it's 0.5 for those over 80, and whatever we can do, the rest goes under 80. You see what I'm saying? Like, to separate them over
Can make
a
a
$50
difference.
raise, to me, is like, it's a $50 raise over the course of 26 paychecks.
Well,
but I guess what I'm looking at is, by doing that, you're lessening the amount we give the upper by a little bit. But for an employee that's making 30,000 to go from 1,750 to 1,850, that extra 100 is bigger than the 100 that that person's
Sure, but
using.
what
I'm just, it was just a thought. It's just a thought. I'm sorry. Shouldn't take up board's time.
Nothing wrong with the thoughts. I am gonna ask us as a committee, like, I think that point's been made, that some of our board members would like to see a review. You can talk to the administration about that. I, as a person, like, my first reaction to that, as one who also handles HR, is precisely a little what you're saying. This, from an HR perspective, also has a dynamic that needs to be evaluated. I do think in front of the board, we have the option that many of you've recommended, which doesn't fully do this, but a flat payment for those at the top represents a 1% to 2%, and for those at the bottom represents a 5% potential payment. So from a percentage perspective, it does the exact same thing that people are recommending. And so here's what I would recommend. If there's some other discussion that we need to have, I would recommend we move in that direction. I'll give you a second, Ms. Thurman. But for now, I want to bring us back to the fact that currently we have two options, four really, that we're going to decide. First is two options. Next, vote on whether we want to go in front of the commission and vote for the version that's still available to us to vote for, and make a statement, really is what it would be, to the commission, or as Mr. Connor wants to say, do what we should have done, however you want to see it, that's fine. But make a statement saying this is what we think should be. By the way, I also believe that it's been my experience, I don't want to besmirch anyone, but it's been my experience that not always a public statement or a PR statement from the county mayor has also been approved and agreed to by the county commission, so I'm not sure where they align or how much they align or if they do or don't. So we can still vote our budget that we initially did, and then secondly, or the alternative budget, and then secondly, whether we choose a flat rate that just goes across, or a flat amount that goes across, or a flat rate. So I want to keep that there. If at the board meeting on the 20th, people want to vote as a board that neither of those and none of those, and we want a whole thing, that's a whole other option always in front of us as a board. But I suggest we move on. I have one more, Ms. Thurman.
Yes, one more thing. Joe, I think I mentioned this to you before. Are we going to bring up about the vacation days, the unlimited vacation days and the 1,680
I
days?
think that would probably,
Is that under Joe?
probably be a policy, a
Well,
board
okay,
policy
but this is also a
conversation.
budget item because that money comes out of our fund balance.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
people retire and they have these vacation days built up, and that's a big hunk, it has been in years past, not so much now, but when people retire, that money for those unused vacation days comes out of our fund balance. That is an unfunded liability that we have, so we really need to get a handle on that. That will help us a little bit with our fund balance, Joe. So
For
I
the
do I need to make a request for that?
Ms.
or-
Sermon, did Penny get you a copy of a draft?
Yeah, I think maybe she.
I think we're trying to get, if
I
I'm
think
not
y'all are
mistaken,
working on
I think
it.
we're trying to get a first read on
Okay,
June.
I should say, I haven't seen it. I don't think I've seen it. But I just want everybody to know that that is one thing that does come out of fund balance that will help us kind of stay that off. And
This is
also, remember, we do not have to vote on the 20th if we don't have to. I mean, the world don't come to an end, trust me. It can go all the way to October. It has before.
Can you clarify to us what would happen? I mean, you have experience, but for everyone.
I think
Nothing
Ms.
has-
Sermon and I could kind of put together we would need Scott to put legal, but
Okay.
essentially a continuation budget just means that you're operating off of
Last
the
year's budget.
previous year's budget.
Okay.
I mean, it's
I
not.
mean, and that's important. Now, I hear you, Mr. Connor, as you're already concerned that we have not done our duty. I obviously disagree with you as the
Yes.
committee
Let's talk some
chair.
more about kicking the can down the road.
But, you know, that would be the concern, right? Now, I do also think as a political body, even though some of us are less inclined that way, we can also play some politics. Dr. Wingate.
I was just gonna mention that, so I've asked Sherry to schedule, the boardroom on the 20th, I believe.
20th is our meeting.
I'm sorry, not the 20th.
How dare you?
The 17th. So that'll be coming out.
For the
You
policy.
guys, correct. 'Cause we've got some, it's a Monday, we've got some second reads coming up on, but Dr. Robertson was also mentioning to me that, Ms. Thurman, the policy that you're referencing, that would be a first read for June's meeting, so.
Okay, so I'm going to take advantage of there's no lights, and I'm going to repeat that on the 20th, we still have a work session on the 20th that we gathered together on, where we're welcome to discuss things further. And we will have a vote on the 20th. If we all vote no, we move on. If we vote yes on one and the county commission votes no on what we said, we move on. If we vote on version 2 and the county commission votes no on it, we gotta move on, which is also possible. So we're gonna move forward on the 20th. I do want to thank the staff. None of this has been easy. It never is. This year, probably like 2019, as some remember, has been equally as complicated. So thank you very much. Thank you for your work, and thank you for your efforts.